This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us for this edition of CBN NewsWatch for Wednesday. It's October 30th. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, the dangerous wildfires in California fueled by wind as a growing number of people face more power outages. As Democrats in Congress pursue impeachment in Washington, Democratic candidate Joe Biden faces a controversy over being denied communion, while Bernie Sanders suggests cutting off aid to Israel. And in the Middle East, while the focus has been on the raid on ISIS, the Israeli prime minister warns the top terrorist power is still in place and getting stronger. And she is one of the most accomplished women in American history. Now, Harriet Tubman's story comes to the big screen this weekend. We've got those stories for you and much more in this edition of CBN Newswatch. We want to begin this half hour with a state of emergency in California. As wildfires burn in the northern and southern parts of the states, people there are facing not only fires, but winds and darkness from yet another power outage that hit more than 1 million people. Heather Sells has our report.
More than 25 million people in California and Arizona face red flag fire warnings today. The National Weather Service is trying to highlight the danger by calling it an extreme red flag warning.
Last time we saw conditions like this, hundreds of homes burned, acres were burned, and it ran clear to the west. Across
the state, firefighters are battling at least 11 wildfires. One of the biggest problems, hurricane-force winds, especially in Southern California. The National Weather Service says wind gusts could reach 80 miles an hour, the strongest wind event in years. Another problem, tinder dry brush and low humidity. That, plus the wind, can blow smoldering fires back to life and start new blazes.
We're at the time of year where we haven't seen any moisture in our fuel beds for an extended period of time. The fuels are critically dry. They are receptive to new fire as well as fire spread.
We now have video that shows how the Getty fire started near Los Angeles. This dash cam footage shows the moment the blaze broke out along the 405 freeway. Investigators say that high winds broke off a tree branch and it landed on power lines, igniting nearby brush. More than 9,000 people in Southern California are still under evacuation orders. And in Northern California, the state's largest utility has begun its third round of sweeping blackouts, hoping to prevent more fires from starting. 1.5 million people are without power there, and in Southern California, the local utility says it may cut power to more than 500,000. The worst fire danger from the winds is expected today and tomorrow, with conditions expected to ease after that. Heather Sells, CBN News.
An Army officer serving with President Donald Trump's National Security Council testified to impeachment investigators that he twice raised concerns over the administration's push to have Ukraine investigate Democrats and Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden. Alexander Vindman was the first official to testify who actually heard the president's phone call to Ukraine on July 25th. In his prepared remarks, he said he did not think it was proper to demand that a foreign government investigate a U.S. citizen. Republicans pushed back on the way Democrats handled the hearing, with Congressman Devin Nunes, the top Republican on the committee, telling Sean Hannity on Fox that the committee chairman, Adam Schiff, coached Vindman during his testimony. New Jersey Democratic Congressman Jeff Van Drew said Tuesday he will not support articles of impeachment against the president. Van Drew is from a swing district that President Trump carried in 2016. Democratic presidential frontrunner Joe Biden isn't talking about reports a Catholic priest at St. Anthony Church in Florence, South Carolina, denied communion to him Sunday because of his support for abortion rights. The Reverend Robert Morey said in a statement, "Sadly, this past Sunday, I had to refuse Holy Communion to former Vice President Joe Biden. Any public figure who advocates for abortion places himself or herself outside the church teaching." Biden told MSNBC Tuesday he would not discuss the reports. And Democratic presidential candidate and socialist Bernie Sanders says if he's elected, he would take the military aid the U.S. gives to Israel every year and instead give it to Gaza. Speaking at the national conference of J Street, a liberal group in Washington which focuses on the conflicts between Israel and Arabs and Palestinians, Sanders said, quote, "My solution is to say to Israel, you get their 0.8 billion every year. If you want military aid, you're going to have to fundamentally change your relationship to the people of Gaza. In fact, I think it's fair to say that some of that should go right now into humanitarian aid. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley criticized Sanders' proposal on Twitter, saying, just when you thought Bernie Sanders couldn't get any more radical, he outdid himself. He wants to take money we give to Israel to defend Israel from terrorists and give it to Gaza, which is run by terrorists. Unreal. Why isn't every other Democratic presidential candidate saying he is wrong? Other Democratic candidates have weighed in, with Elizabeth Warren saying cutting aid to Israel is on the table, while Joe Biden says withholding aid to the Jewish state is counterproductive. Britain may finally be ready to break the paralysis that has gripped it for more than 3 years since the voters decided to break away from the European Union in their historic referendum in 2016. But the government has not been able to come up with a plan to make the Britain's exit, or Brexit, actually happen. Now the country will vote on December 12th in a general election that lawmakers and the public hope will break the deadlock. Dale Hurd now reports from London.
Brexit opponents have finally agreed to a general election.
Labour backs a general election because we want this country to be rid of this reckless and destructive Conservative government.
This might be called a general election, but it is, of course, a second referendum on whether Britain will leave the European Union, and if it leaves, how. Opinion polls give Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservatives the lead, but the election may not give either side the majority needed to break the deadlock.
The Conservatives would probably win, but not with a very big majority, actually. And it's always possible, remember what's happened to British politics in recent times, that we'd hold a general election, and then, miracle of miracles, we'd end up with another hung parliament with no one party in control.
Johnson, who has vowed to take Britain out of the European Union one way or another, accused his opponents of sabotage by delay.
They just want to spin it out forever till the 12th of never, Mr. Speaker. And when the 12th of never eventually comes round, they'll devise one of their complicated parliamentary procedures and move a motion for a further delay and a further extension then, Mr. Speaker.
What do we want? Brexit! When do we want it? Now!
Voters are fed up after more than 3 years of Brexit drama, and it will be a very grumpy Britain that will vote December 12th. Dale Hurd, CBN News, London.
A federal judge has blocked a strict abortion ban in Alabama. The law, set to go in effect next month, would have made abortion a felony at any stage of pregnancy in almost all cases. Under the law, medical professionals who provided abortions could face 10 years to life in prison. But a U.S. district judge issued a preliminary injunction Tuesday blocking Alabama from enforcing it after the American Civil Liberties Union of Alabama and Planned Parenthood sued the state, declaring the law is unconstitutional. Alabama is one of several states attempting to challenge the Supreme Court's decision on Roe v. Wade, along with Ohio, Georgia, Iowa, North Dakota, Kentucky, and Mississippi. Coming up, the U.S. took out the leader of ISIS over the weekend, but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has just given a warning to senior U.S. officials. The biggest sponsor of terrorism is still in power and getting stronger. We're going to have that story when we come back.
Having sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Watch Dan and Dale tackle trending topics that test your faith on the next Faith Wire, Monday night at 9:30. The Global Lane takes you around the world, providing facts over fiction.
What might rising trade and geopolitical tensions mean for you on the home front?
With over 45 years of experience, award-winning journalist Gary Lane brings you the truth from a global angle.
What about the issue of immigration?
World news analysis you won't see anywhere else.
And it's all right here on the Global Lane.
Watch The Global Lane, Thursday night at 9:30.
It's like a great attraction. Let's start to chain reaction. Put on more satisfaction. Get the top political news and analysis from Washington on Faith Nation, tonight at 6 Eastern, only on the CBN News Channel.
While the world is focused on the fighting in Syria and the successful U.S. targeted killing of the ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu warned during a visit with senior American officials the biggest sponsor of terrorism is still in place and getting stronger. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us the story now from Jerusalem.
Prime Minister Netanyahu said Iran wants to use Yemen, where it backs Houthi rebels, to launch precision missiles at Israel.
We are faced with an evil empire. It's called Iran. Iran wants to develop precision-guided missiles that can hit any target in Israel within 5 to 10 meters. It's doing that. Iran wants to use Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen as bases to attack Israel with statistical missiles and precision-guided missiles.
For several years, Israel has bombed Iranian targets in Iraq and Syria numerous times to prevent Iran's goal of transferring weapons and establishing a 700-mile land bridge from Tehran to the Mediterranean Sea. Netanyahu's warning followed a meeting in Jerusalem with U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. The Prime Minister congratulated President Trump on the death of ISIS leader al-Baghdadi, but called on Washington to ramp up sanctions against Iran.
Iran's capacity to launch its aggression, to develop its weapons of death, to purvey its menacing ways, that capacity is diminished to the extent that you can tighten your sanctions and make the availability of cash more difficult for them.
Mnuchin said the U.S. shares Israel's concerns over Iran.
We have executed on a maximum pressure campaign for sanctions. They have worked. They are working. They are cutting off the money. We are not doing this to hurt the people of Iran. We are doing this so that Iran stops their bad activities and exporting terrorism, looking to create nuclear capabilities and missiles. And we will continue to ramp up more, as you've said.
On Iranian TV, this official repeated his country's long-standing threat to destroy the Jewish state.
If Israel or America make a mistake, Israel won't live for longer than 20 or 30 minutes.
IDF Chief of Staff Aviv Kochavi warned last week Israel's northern border is its central strategic challenge because of the Iranian military buildup in Syria and its development of precision missiles in Lebanon. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell joins us now from Jerusalem. So, Chris, does the situation in northeast Syria now strengthen Iran, and does this concern Israel?
Well, it certainly does concern Israel, Ephraim, and it does potentially make it more difficult if the situation in northeast Syria continues to be unstable. It does appear that the United States has positioned U.S. troops along the eastern border of Syria, along with Iraq. So that does potentially block Iran to a certain extent. But Ephraim, if you look at the map, and I think this is what Netanyahu was referring to as well, you have Lebanon on Israel's northern border. You have Syria and Iraq, where Iran has positioned missiles. And also you have Yemen way down south. So really, if you look at the map, Israel is surrounded by proxies affiliated with Iran that potentially could have precision-guided missiles aimed at the Jewish state, and I think that really does concern Israel right now. Why? It's also meeting with U.S. officials like U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo right after the ceasefire there in northeast Syria, and obviously Secretary Mnuchin just a day or two ago. So they're very concerned about what's happening in northeast Syria and the risk to the Jewish state.
Exactly. What is the latest on the ground inside northeast Syria?
Well, it's a complicated situation right now, Ephraim. You do have Russian and Syrian troops actually filling the vacuum of some of the Syrian Democratic Forces, those Kurdish forces that are in northeast Syria. But you also have some conflict between some of the Turkish forces the Free Syrian Alliance, which is allied with Turkey, and some of these Russians and Syrian forces. I've seen some video of dead Syrian troops from the regime, and also an attack on a Russian installation. So there is some tension between both Turkey and Russia and the regime. So we'll have to keep an eye on that to see what happens. On the ground, it's still a humanitarian crisis. 200,000 to 300,000 people displaced. Christians have really fled what some people call a genocide zone, a killing zone. So on the ground, it's very, very difficult. We've been in touch with a humanitarian group called the Free Burma Rangers, and they're giving daily updates of what's happening. They've really said there's really been no ceasefire, as it were, there. So it really a very difficult situation for the people on the ground.
There are major demonstrations going on in Lebanon and in Iraq. What impact are they having on these countries and the region?
Well, Lebanon's prime minister has just resigned. That government looks like it might be toppled by these demonstrations. Also in Iraq, you hear they're trying to get to the government facilities there in the so-called green zone. It's interesting to note that both of these companies are dominated by either Hezbollah, the Iranian proxy in Lebanon, and also in Iraq. So it's really against the Iranian government. So it's really, we'll have to watch to see what happens, and that might actually restrain some of the Iranian influence here in the region. That would be a good thing for Israel.
Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell reporting from Jerusalem. Chris, thank you so much. Still ahead, she was the most successful conductor on the Underground Railroad, and she couldn't read or write. The incredible life of Harriet Tubman is now hitting the big screen. We're sitting down with the stars to explore Tubman's fate. Stay with us.
On the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
On the home front, Tuesday morning at 10:30.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government.
My focus has been trying to really make sure we have the future leaders we need for the bench and the bar and for society generally.
You'll learn from highly credentialed leaders who are current and former judges, distinguished scholars, and ACLJ counsel.
I'm so glad I chose Regent. The relationships here have been amazing. The faculty have been amazing. Not everybody's called to the same thing when they leave law school, but they're called by a God who has a purpose for their lives, and He is going to use that education to make a difference in the world.
Regent will prepare you to be a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer. To start your rewarding law career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July. Apply today.
The United States Treasury may have delayed Harriet Tubman's debut on the $20 bill, but her spotlight on the silver screen begins in just 2 days when the film Harriet hits theaters across the country. It's an incredible journey of faith for the former slave who actually never learned to read or write. It stars actress, singer, and songwriter Cynthia Erivo as Harriet, and actor and singer Leslie Odom Jr. plays William Still, an African-American abolitionist in the Philadelphia area and a conductor on the Underground Railroad. We're sitting down with both, but first, watch what happens in this scene when Harriet tells William she's going back to save her family a year after she has been free.
Rescuing slaves requires skill and careful planning. It requires reading, Harriet. Can you read a sign or a map? Can you read it all?
I put my attention on trying to hear God's voice more clearly.
Do you know what would happen if you got caught? They would torture you until you pointed them right to this office. You got lucky, Harriet. And there's nothing more you can do.
Don't you tell me what I can't do. I made it this far on my own. God was watching, but my feet was my own. Running, bleeding, climbing, nearly drowned, nothing to eat for days and days, man. I made it. So don't you tell me what I can't do.
What did faith mean for Harriet on this journey?
It meant everything. I think it was one of the driving forces for her to keep moving forward. She says, notably, that God would give her messages in which she would use to follow through. And that is part of her story. She used to tell a one-woman story, one-woman performance about her run to freedom, and she would talk about the connections in which she made with God, the messages she would get from God to make the journey. So I believe it was one of the most important things to her, and she would speak on that faith. Yeah.
If both of you could take me back to Virginia, you guys are out shooting this film. How emotional was the experience?
Oh. It was very emotional for me, particularly. It was emotional. It pulled on everything. You know, you're reliving loss consistently. You're reliving hardships and hard work, and when you combine that with exhaustion and tiredness and the physical work that has to be done, you wear yourself quite thin, so that the line between you and the character and the person sort of fades a little. So everything is right at the surface. Yeah, it was intense, for sure.
Leslie, how emotional was it for you?
I mean, William really, part of his reason for being in the film is that it's just this really wonderful juxtaposition of two very different portraits of Black life living in America at the same exact time, and you know, kind of how combustible that can be. You know, it's a source of drama and comedy in our movie. Obviously, they're a huge support for one another, but I'll say, you know, yeah, my stuff really, you know, pales in comparison to almost the way Williams would have, you know, to what Harriet had to go through. You know, William was in his office, he was at the printing press, you know. His work was very different, you know. He made real change for sure, and was an architect of this network, you know. Brilliant man, and also had the, you know, when thinking about how much instinct plays a part in this story, you know, Harriet's relationship with God, that was instinct that led William to record these stories. You know, to write these stories down. He risked everything to make sure that there was a record of this bravery and courage and these impossible stories. William saw to it that there was a record of it.
Harriet hits theaters this Friday, and tonight, Studio 5 takes a special look at the film with more from the stars, the film's director, and the author of Harriet Tubman's biography. Now, you can catch this special episode of Studio 5 beginning at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, only on the CBN News Channel. Coming up, how Christian recording artist Toby Mac and his wife are honoring his 21-year-old son who died unexpectedly last week. Stay with us.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government. Ready to become a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer? To start your rewarding career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July.
Nutrition, exercise, essential oils, weight loss, and more. It's Healthy Living with Lori Johnson.
Talk about what's in this.
Join CBN health reporter Lori Johnson to get the latest information from today's top health experts.
This is fantastic.
Find out what you need to know to live a healthier life. Watch Healthy Living, Tuesday night at 9:30.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
Millsburg Falls man coming.
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes, too. And so much more! Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon. It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
Check out the CBN News Daily Rundown podcast each weekday with me, Caitlin Burke. Click on the show tab at cbnnews.com where you can listen and subscribe.
Christian recording artist Toby Mac and his wife have started a nonprofit foundation. They did so Tuesday in honor of their 21-year-old son, Truett Foster McKeon. The Truett Foster Foundation will raise money to help young people to accomplish their dreams. The organization's website says too many children do not have the financial ability to pursue their dreams. We want to use this fund to help children do just that, to get an education, to pursue music, to get the chance to chase their dreams. Truett would love that. And time now for your Wednesday word. I want to leave you with this thought. Failure isn't fatal or final. It's a closed door that moves you closer to the open door that God has waiting for you. So after every failure, get back up, dust yourself off, and keep moving in faith. God has not forgotten you or his plan for your life. With that word, I encourage you to make today a wonderful Wednesday. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, you can find more of our CBN News programs on the CBN News channel at any time or online at cbnnews.com. We would love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us. That address is newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Certainly hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a wonderful Wednesday. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow, everybody. Goodbye, and God bless you.